Welcome back to my channel. My name is Valerie. I'm here to talk to you about literacy and literacy development. I am currently teaching middle school and 7th grade specifically, so I wanted to make this video a little bit more relevant to my students this year. I wanted to talk specifically about manga is what I call it, and whether or not that's considered literature. So in my experience, I've had quite a few parents tell me, oh, my child will only read manga or comic books, and I tell them all the time to stop. But there are many studies out there that say all reading is good reading. So it doesn't actually matter what children are reading as long as they're reading in terms of literacy development, right? So when parents ask me, should I make them read something else? I actually don't think that they need to read something else as long as they're reading. Reading is important. All reading is important. I'll probably say that about 17 more times, but all reading is important. Okay, sorry. This is actually my collection. Some of them are my collection. Fushigi Yugi, Nana, Attack on Titan, and Inuyasha. Inuyasha is a little bit older, but the reason that I wanted to highlight these specifically today is because what I did want to talk about in terms of manga and whether or not children should be reading manga is the way that they are, the rating system for them is a little bit different, I think, than the way we consider rating here in the United States. So of course, they are rated by our own rating commission. But some of the things that happen in Japanese manga are a little bit different than what would happen in American or Western manga. And that is, of course, because cultural differences, right? Because of cultural differences. So, for example, I read a manga not too long ago about a parent and her child. There was a scene in the manga where a parent and her child were going to an onsen, and an onsen is a public bath. And if you've ever been to Japan, it's a hot spring. It's really pretty. It's usually out in nature. It's really hot. And it's a cultural thing that you do. Everybody does it. But obviously it's a bathhouse. People are naked. And, they're not very graphic, but it is a bathhouse. So there's a lot of skin in the scene. The manga itself wasn't written as a rated R manga, but I could see how that scene and that situation, not every parent would enjoy that scene for their child. So Inuyasha, moving along, Inuyasha is one that I watched when I was a teenager, so it's kind of an old one now, honestly. It's about a Japanese high school girl. So if you imagine the content is really centered around high school, she ends up taming this demon. It's in Japan anyway, it's a child show. It's not a teenager show, really. It's maybe like older child, maybe like 12, 10, 11, 12. And so the storyline and the readability of this particular manga is really for middle school and maybe early high school. It doesn't have sex, it doesn't have a lot of bad words, it's not that kind of manga, but because of some of the violence, and I would say it's mostly violence, it's rated. So for this particular manga, it is not very sexual, there's not a lot of bad words or anything like that, but it is violent, and a lot of these sorts of shonen manga are violent. That's part of, the exciting adventure story. So this one here is rated older teen, but the content within is not really older teen in terms of like the story development. However, some of the scenes might be considered older teen, if that makes sense. The same is true for this one. This one is Fushigi Yugi, and this is another fantasy manga. It's for older teens. Again, this one doesn't have sex. It has violence. I don't know if that's better for you, but if you look, there are a lot of things in there that might be difficult for very young readers, but it's really common for me to see middle school students reading this type of book. So Inuyasha and Fushigi Yugi, I would almost say 10, 11, 12 is a really common reading age for them. Now I'm going to bring you actually my favorite. I'm reading Attack on Titan. I have the entire collection, and I also watched the anime in Japanese. This one is probably the most violent manga next to Berserk that I've ever read. That being said, it's a really good story in terms of story development, character development, plot lines. All of the things that I really need my students to understand are in this book. So depending on what your parenting style is, if you are a parent who's very, very strict about the type of violence that their children is exposed to, then yes, this is not a book for you. However, if you're kind of lax, your kid, you kind of trust your kid to make decisions. 90% of my students who read have read this particular comic, and it's because it's really, really intriguing. There are a lot of twists and turns and things that happen in this story that keep even my most hesitant readers engaged. And I think it's like 26, maybe it's a 50 now, comics, and you can get them at the library. They're about this thick, right? And they don't all have words. Some of them are pretty text light, but some of them are also really text heavy. So if children are reading manga and they're specifically reading something like this, I understand if you don't want kids to read this at this age. But what I will say is the children who are reading this are not reading it for the violence. They're reading it for the storyline. And I've had lots of conversations with students who have already seen the anime because it's on Netflix. So they've already watched it. And now they're just reading it because they have to read in class or they have to read a story. And it's the only thing that they know that they want to read. So I would keep that in mind. If you read the back, actually, it says Japan's equivalent of The Walking Dead. So I would say that's actually pretty accurate. If you allow your child to watch Walking Dead or they have had exposure to Walking Dead, then this is pretty similar. And the last one that I wanted to show you, because it's a little bit different, this one is Nana. I read Nana in my early 20s, so it's kind of a bit older now, but they just did a reboot and I think they just kind of remade a lot of these. It is the number one all-time manga in Japan. And this one is different because the other ones are shonen, or they're like more geared towards boys, and I wouldn't even say boys because I read this, but it's more violence, less romance, more on that side. But this one is different because this one is shoujo, and shoujo is written in a way that is more geared towards romance. There is generally no violence, and what it means is that you might find more sex, and that's almost wrong because there's not really sex in any of these, but you might find like there's usually no nudity. So if nudity is a thing for you, nudity is not usually in the books that are teen, that have the teen label. But you might find some very short clothes, or you might find some situations that may seem like something's gonna happen, but 9 times out of 10, nothing ever does happen. Of course, this is just a general guide, right? So in Nana, she meets, there's a little girl, a young lady named Nana, and she has a roommate named Nana. And so it's kind of a funny situation where the two Nanas are very different. There's the Nana in the really cute dress, and then there's the kind of punk rock, cool Nana as her roommate, and you kind of go through and find out what they're like, and there's like romance. Finally, the last thing I think I wanted to talk about is that there's a little bit of sexual tension between the Nanas. If that bothers you, that is a very common sort of situation in shoujo. Again, usually nothing happens, so it's just tension. And Japanese literature, if it's not like, if we're talking outside of manga, they're really good at having that sort of tension. And so you might find that almost across all genres. And it doesn't mean that it's promoting homosexuality. It's contextual to different characters and different character development. But it is something to note because it does happen in quite a few of the books. I don't think in any of the books that I showed you just now. There's a lot of it, but if you are concerned about that sort of thing, it is something to notice. I don't have a lot of parents where I teach currently that it really bothers. I think a lot of the parents that I currently teach are more concerned with the fact that their child is reading. And if you find that your child has a series that they really like, my suggestion would just be to do a quick search of the title and maybe check Amazon, read some of the reviews, see what some of the negative comments are, to find out what kind of what people are reacting to, because that might be relevant to your personal preferences and views. But my conclusion, and what I really want to stress, is that all reading is reading, right? That's the whole point of this video, is that all reading is reading. So if your child is reading manga and they enjoy reading manga, I would try to balance what it is that they're reading with what you want them to learn, with how important it is for them to read, and do you want to stunt their reading? Does that make sense? I have a niece who's about 16. She's been reading these since she was about 13, 14 years old. I don't know that my sister had a big problem with them. I know that there were a couple times that my brother-in-law was like, nope. Again, it's a case-by-case basis, and it really depends on your family and your family dynamics and that sort of thing. But just in terms of whether or not they should be reading it for literacy development, absolutely. Absolutely, they should be reading it for literacy development, because all reading is reading. So thank you so much for watching today. If you like this video, please hit that like and subscribe button so you never miss one. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.